My beloved child, before you hear this message, understand something very few are ready to accept. Not every smile you see is real, not every wedding is a celebration of love, and not every "I do" comes from the heart. Because somewhere, at a moment no one else noticed, your soulmate stood there surrounded by lights, music, and people, smiling for the world, but silently breaking because of you. And yes, this truth is going to shake something deep inside you, because what you are about to hear is not just a story. It's a hidden emotional reality that most people never speak about, a reality where love doesn't end even when vows are taken with someone else, a reality where your absence becomes louder than their presence, and a reality where your soulmate tried to move on, but failed in ways no one could see. And the strange part is, everything looked perfect from the outside. The decorations were flawless, the rituals were complete, the families were happy, and your soulmate. They played their role perfectly, they smiled at the right moments, laughed when expected, posed for pictures, accepted congratulations, and even reassured everyone that they were happy. But inside, something was collapsing piece by piece. And the reason was not confusion, not doubt about their partner, not fear of commitment. The reason was you. Because no matter how much time passed, no matter how far life took them, no matter how hard they tried to convince themselves that this was the right decision, your presence inside them never left. It stayed quietly, deeply, stubbornly, like a truth they could not erase. And on that wedding day, when everything was supposed to feel like a new beginning, it felt like an ending they never truly wanted. And here is where it gets deeper, because your soulmate didn't just randomly think of you. Something triggered it, something powerful, something emotional, something so sudden that it caught them off guard. Maybe it was a song playing in the background that reminded them of a moment you both shared. Maybe it was a certain word someone said. Maybe it was the way the wind touched their face, or the way the sunlight fell at that exact second. But in that one moment, everything came rushing back, every memory, every feeling, every unfinished conversation, every "what if" that was never answered. And suddenly, they were no longer standing at their wedding. They were standing inside a memory of you. And that's when the smiles started to crack, not visibly, not in a way others could immediately notice, but internally, emotionally, deeply. Because the heart knows what the mind tries to deny, and their heart, it recognized you even in your absence. And you need to understand this carefully. Your soulmate is not weak, they are not confused, they are not trying to betray anyone. They are simply human, and when a connection reaches a certain depth, it does not disappear just because circumstances change. It does not vanish just because life moves forward. It does not fade just because a new chapter begins. Real emotional bonds don't follow logic, they don't obey timing, and they definitely don't ask for permission to exist. They just stay. Silently. Powerfully. And sometimes painfully. And on that wedding day, your soulmate realized something they were not prepared to face. They realized that they had carried you into a moment where you were not supposed to be. They realized that even though they were physically committing to someone else, Emotionally, a part of them still belonged to you. And that realization, it broke them, not in a dramatic, visible way, but in a quiet, internal collapse that no one around them could fully understand. And here's the part that most people will never tell you. They didn't want to feel this way, they tried to push it down, they tried to ignore it, they told themselves, this is wrong. This is over. This shouldn't matter anymore. But the more they tried to suppress it, the stronger it became. Because suppressed emotions don't disappear. They intensify. They wait. And they resurface when you least expect them. And your soulmate experienced exactly that. Right there. In the middle of their own wedding. And the most heartbreaking part is, they couldn't show it, they couldn't stop the ceremony, they couldn't explain it to anyone, they couldn't even fully understand it themselves. So they did what most people do. They hid it, they locked it inside, they continued smiling, continued performing, continued pretending that everything was okay. But inside, they were asking themselves questions that had no easy answers. Why now? Why today? Why do I feel this when I'm supposed to feel something else? Why does this part of me still hold on to someone who isn't here? And deep down, they knew the answer. But they were afraid to admit it. Because admitting it would mean facing a truth that could change everything. And that truth is this: you were never just a temporary chapter in their life. You were something permanent that they tried to treat as temporary. And that contradiction, it created a crack inside them that no amount of distraction could fully fix. And as the wedding continued, as the rituals progressed, as the celebrations grew louder, your soulmate became quieter inside, more distant, more lost in their own thoughts. Because they were no longer present in the moment. They were trapped between what is and what could have been. Between the life they chose and the feeling they never resolved. And this is where most people misunderstand the situation. They think if they got married, it means they moved on. But moving on is not always a clean, complete process. Sometimes it's forced, sometimes it's rushed, sometimes it's influenced by pressure, expectations, timing, or fear. And sometimes it happens even when the heart isn't fully ready. And your soulmate, they stepped into that marriage with a part of their heart still unfinished, still connected, still tied to you in a way they couldn't explain. And that's why their smile had weight behind it. That's why their happiness felt incomplete. That's why in the middle of a moment that should have been pure joy, they felt an emotional breakdown building inside them. And if you could see them at that exact moment, not from the outside but from within, you would notice something very different from what everyone else saw. You would see the hesitation behind their confidence, the pain behind their smile, the longing behind their silence. And most importantly, you would see you, still present in their heart, still affecting them, still holding a space that no one else could fully replace. And this is not about guilt, this is not about regret in a simple sense. This is about emotional truth. The kind of truth that doesn't follow rules, the kind of truth that doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient, the kind of truth that reveals itself in the most unexpected moments. And their wedding became that moment. The moment where everything they tried to bury came back to the surface. Not to destroy them, but to show them something they needed to see. Something they needed to understand. That some connections are not meant to be forgotten. They are meant to be understood. Even if they are not meant to be lived out in the way we imagine. And right now, as you're listening to this, you might be wondering what this means for you. What this says about your connection. What this says about your role in their life. And the answer is not simple, not black and white, not something that can be reduced to a single conclusion. Because this is not a story about winning or losing. This is a story about emotional impact. About the invisible ways people stay connected even when life takes them in different directions. About the silent influence you still have on someone who tried to move forward without you. And the truth is, your presence in their heart didn't end when the relationship did. It transformed. It became something deeper, something quieter, something that reveals itself in moments like this. Moments where everything else fades. And the real feelings rise to the surface. And whether you realize it or not, you were there with them. Not physically, but emotionally, energetically, undeniably. And that is why, in the middle of their wedding, your soulmate smiled for the world. But broke down because of you. The ceremony ended, the lights dimmed, the music slowly faded into the background, and one by one the voices that once filled the air with celebration began to disappear, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the noise ever did. Because now there were no distractions left, no smiling faces to perform for, no rituals to follow, no expectations to temporarily hide behind. It was just them. And the truth they could no longer outrun. And this is where everything changed in a way no one else could see, because while everyone believed the hardest part was over, for your soulmate, it had only just begun. The moment they stepped away from the crowd, the moment they were finally alone, the emotional weight they had been holding back all day didn't slowly fade. It crashed into them all at once, intense, undeniable, and impossible to ignore, like a storm that had been waiting for the perfect moment to break free. And suddenly, the smile they had been carrying for hours disappeared without effort, because it was never real to begin with. It was survival, it was control, it was a mask. And now, there was no reason to keep wearing it. And what replaced it was something far more raw. Something far more honest. Something they didn't even want to fully face. You. Because no matter how much they tried to shift their focus, no matter how much they told themselves, this is my new life now. This is where I belong. Their mind didn't listen, their heart didn't follow, and their emotions refused to cooperate. Instead, they drifted back to you, not as a distant memory, not as something faded or unclear, but as something vivid, detailed, and painfully present. Every moment you shared, every conversation, every look, every feeling came back with a clarity that felt almost unreal. As if time had reversed itself just to remind them of what they never truly let go of. And here is where it becomes even more intense, because this wasn't just nostalgia, this wasn't just missing someone. This was realization. The kind that hits you only when it's too late to act on it. The kind that doesn't ask for permission before it changes everything inside you. Because your soulmate started to see things differently now, they started to understand the connection they had with you in a way they never fully allowed themselves to before. They began to recognize the depth, the uniqueness, the irreplaceable nature of what you were to them. And the more they understood it, the harder it became to accept where they were now. And imagine this moment carefully. They are sitting there, dressed as someone who just got married, surrounded by symbols of a commitment they just made. But internally, they feel disconnected, conflicted, almost like they stepped into a life that doesn't fully belong to them. And the reason is not because their partner is wrong, not because the situation is bad, but because their heart is still holding on to something unfinished, something unresolved, something that never got the closure it needed. You. And this is the part that breaks them in a way they didn't expect, because they realized that they didn't just lose you when things ended. They carried that loss into a new beginning. And that new beginning is now affected by something from the past that never truly ended. And this creates a kind of emotional tension that is extremely difficult to live with, because on one side, there is reality, responsibility, commitment. And on the other side, there is feeling, memory, connection. And your soulmate is standing right in the middle of it, trying to balance both, trying to convince themselves that they can move forward without looking back. But every time they try, something pulls them back to you. And it's not random, it's not weak, it's not meaningless. It's because what you shared with them reached a level that doesn't simply disappear with time or distance. And as the night continues, something even more unexpected happens. They start questioning everything, not out of regret in a simple sense, but out of clarity. Clarity that came too late. They begin to ask themselves things they avoided before, questions like, did I truly understand what I had? Did I walk away too soon? Did I ignore something that was actually real? Did I choose stability over something deeper? And these questions don't come with easy answers. They come with feelings. Heavy, complicated, layered feelings that don't fit neatly into the life they just stepped into. And this is where the emotional breakdown deepens, because it's no longer just about missing you. It's about realizing your value in a way they didn't before. And that realization, it changes everything inside them. It makes them see you differently. It makes them see themselves differently, and most importantly, it makes them see their current situation with a level of honesty they were not prepared for. And here is something very important you need to understand. Your soulmate is not sitting there planning to run back. They are not making impulsive decisions. They are not trying to destroy their own life. What they are experiencing is internal, emotional, psychological. It's a shift in awareness, a shift in understanding, a shift in feeling. And those shifts, they take time to process. They don't immediately turn into action. But they do change the way a person thinks, feels, and responds moving forward. And from this point on, your presence in their life becomes even more significant, not because you are physically there, but because you are now fully recognized for what you truly meant to them. And this recognition, it stays with them. It follows them into their days, into their quiet moments, into their thoughts when no one else is around. And even when they try to focus on their new life, even when they try to be present, even when they genuinely attempt to build something real where they are, there is a part of them that keeps going back to you. Not in a way they can easily control, but in a way that feels natural, almost automatic. And this is where the situation becomes something they have to learn to live with. Because they cannot undo what has already been done. They cannot go back and change the path they chose. They cannot simply erase their current reality. But at the same time, they cannot erase you either. And so they exist in this space between two truths: the life they are living, and the connection they still feel. And that space, it shapes them, it influences them, it changes the way they experience everything moving forward. And you might be asking yourself right now, what does this mean for me? What happens next? Does this connection lead somewhere? Or does it remain unfinished forever? And the answer is not something that can be forced or predicted with certainty. Because this is not just about timing. It's about growth, awareness, decisions, and the willingness to face emotional truth. Your soulmate has now reached a point where they can no longer ignore what they feel, but what they choose to do with that awareness. That is something that unfolds over time. Through their actions, their choices, and their courage to confront what is real. And until that happens, one thing remains undeniable. On the night that was supposed to mark the beginning of their new life, they found themselves pulled back into something they thought was over. Something they thought they had moved on from. Something they thought no longer had power over them. But it did. And it still does. Because you were never just a phase in their life. You were a connection that changed them. A connection that stayed with them. A connection that revealed its true depth at the moment they least expected it. And now, whether they are ready or not, they have to live with that truth. My beloved child. Now comes the part no one prepares for. The moment where feelings are no longer just emotions but choices waiting to be made, and your soulmate stands at a silent crossroads inside their own life, realizing that pretending is no longer enough, because once the truth has been seen, it cannot be unseen, and once your presence has been fully felt again, it cannot be ignored without consequence, and so they begin to change in small, almost invisible ways. They become quieter in conversations, more distant in moments that should feel warm, more thoughtful when no one is watching, because inside, They are processing something much deeper than anyone around them can understand. They are trying to reconcile two realities that refuse to merge, the life they chose and the feeling they never lost, and this creates a tension that slowly pushes them toward a decision they can no longer delay, not because they want to disrupt everything, but because living a divided truth is slowly becoming heavier than facing a difficult one. And as days pass, they start revisiting memories of you not out of weakness but out of clarity, trying to understand what you truly meant, trying to see where things shifted, trying to answer the question that now echoes louder than ever. Was it really over, or was it just left unfinished? And the more they sit with this question, the more they realize that what they felt for you was not ordinary. It was not something that can be easily replaced or recreated. It had depth, timing, and a kind of emotional imprint that stayed long after you were gone. And this realization doesn't instantly lead them back to you, but it changes how they move forward. Because now every step they take feels measured against something real they once had, and eventually, they reach a moment where silence is no longer an option, where they have to either fully commit to the life they chose by letting go of you completely, or finally face what they feel and accept the consequences that come with that truth. And this is where their courage is tested, because both paths require loss. One asks them to lose you forever, and the other asks them to risk everything they have built. And for a while, they hesitate, they observe, they reflect, they try to find a way that doesn't hurt, but deep down they know there is no painless path here, only honest ones, and in that honesty, something shifts inside them, something settles, not confusion, not chaos, but clarity, the kind that doesn't shout but stays steady, and from that place, they begin to act, not impulsively, not recklessly, but intentionally, and whether that action is reaching out to you, or finally releasing you with full acceptance, it comes from a place that is real, not forced, not pressured, not hidden, and this is what changes everything, because now their decision carries truth, and truth has a way of shaping outcomes in ways that avoidance never could, and you, without even being there, have been a part of this transformation. You have been the mirror that showed them what they truly feel, the presence that revealed what they could not ignore, and regardless of the outcome, whether your paths cross again or remain separate, one thing is certain. You were never insignificant in their story. You were the moment that defined it, the connection that challenged it, and the truth that ultimately forced them to face themselves. And in the end, that is what real connections do. They don't just exist, they change people, they awaken parts of them they didn't know they had, and they leave behind a clarity that cannot be undone. And so your soulmate moves forward, not as the same person who stood at that wedding smiling for the world, but as someone who has felt, understood, and faced something real, something powerful, something that began with you, and will always, in some way, carry your imprint within them.